Hi, welcome to week 6. This week I'll be talking about chapter 3. Okay, so this chapter allows you to introduce your study or your project to the reader. And this is an opportunity for you to set the stage for what you're attempting to accomplish in your study or your project. It is intended to kind of make the reader more interested, to read the entire study or complete the project or read about the project. So in this chapter, you're going to use APA format, of course, and you are going to talk about the background and the content of the problem or area of focus. I'm sorry, that's chapter 1. I apologize. That's the introduction. I'm sorry, let me go back. So in this chapter, you're going to restate information that you already included in chapter 1. So the background, statement of the problem, purpose of the statement, objectives of the study, the hypothesis, the assumptions, the limitation, and the definition of terms, okay? So I have a PowerPoint that I'd like to share with you, and we'll get started on that. Okay, so in developing chapter 3 of the research project, you're going to state the purpose of your research, the methods that you'll be using to adopt, the instruments that you'll be using. We talked a little bit about journals, open-ended questions or surveys. Those are different types of methodologies that you'll use. Also, you can use data collection from other websites and to help you with your population, especially if you're doing a comparison of the population. You're going to talk about the instruments that, like I said, that you'll be using, where you'll be collecting your data, the type of data collections, and how you collected it. This chapter is going to explain different methods to be used here in the research project. And this is where we're going to use, we'll talk about the triangulation method, and that comes out in chapter 4, which will be written in 605. You're going to talk about the procedures and strategies that you'll employ in the study, such as the research design, the study designed in research or the research area, and the population of the study. Why you chose a particular method, your method analysis and how you plan to analyze your data, and your methodology should be written in simple language so that other researchers can follow the methods and arrive at the same conclusions. So there are different types of methodologies, and so we're going to be talking about there's structured questionnaires, there's interviews, and then there's experimentation. Now, we don't have a lot of time for experimentation, so I hope that you kind of steer away from that one. So here are the components for chapter 3: the participants, the instrument, the procedure, the design, the data analysis, and the limitations. The proposal should be written in the past tense, okay? Because it would have been something that you already completed. One of the recommendations in the handbook is that you begin with it in the past so that you don't have to change the past tense once you are submitting your final copy. So go ahead and writing it in the past tense when you submit it to me in this particular course is fine. So the participants, who are they? It's the targeted population and the sample that you'll be using for the generalization about the targeted population. We went over this a little bit and when I did a couple of examples in the previous video. And we talked about, you know, your sample size is going to be really small. Like if you are at a school where it is 95% Latino, Latina, Latinx, then we would definitely take a look, a small sample size of that. If that grade level consists of 6th, 7th, and 8th, then you're going to take about 10 from 7th, 10 from 8th, and put them together, you know, or 15 and 15, or 15 and 10. You know, sometimes the goal is to have about 20, and then maybe all that participate in it is about 10. So then you at least get your sample size. So we always say don't go as much as like 30 or 40 or a whole class. In the past, when we were face-to-face, it may have been a little bit easier, especially if you got the permission from a particular teacher to go in and do a lesson with them and have them fill out some paperwork, and you had like 40 minutes to do that particular lesson. Then in that situation, you would have a whole class. Maybe on that day, the class is 36, but potentially maybe that particular class only 30 showed up that day, and if only 30 showed up that day, then that's your size sample. And then your demographic information, such as the age, the gender, the ethnicity of your sample, that's going to be it. And then the procedure of the selected, for the selected sample. It should be outlined, including the justification for the sampling method, also known as the sampling procedures. Okay, so let's go a little bit more into the population. I already did this a bit on the population as a group of individuals that have the same characteristics. A sample is a subgroup of that targeted population that the researcher plans to study for the purpose of making those generalizations about the targeted population. Samples are just estimates, and the difference between the sample estimate and a true population is sampling error. So this is kind of like, this sample is derived from a population, a sample, and then a sample population. So the population, all radiologists, all online college students, and all community colleges, and then adult educators in all schools of education. And then the sample is just the radiologists at Jackson Hospital, the students at Broward County Community College, and then the adult educators in 5 schools of education in the Midwest. So the population size, as you can see, goes down to that. So we're talking about, we could be talking about all middle schools, local middle schools in the Los Angeles County area, and then we're going to go down to just our particular local school, maybe 2, maybe 1, it just depends. Okay, so that's an example of how we are sampling. The demographics, that's pretty simple and straightforward: age, gender, and ethnicity. And then this is examples of how it could be written. The general sample was composed of 223 participants, 163 male, 55 female. The median age range was 14.55 years. Standard deviation 1.5. Age range 10 to 18 years. Participants were divided by race, and then the percentages of the race. Okay. This sample is written in the past tense, but should be written in the future tense for concepts and proposals. And then also the details of the demographics would be unknown at these stages. Therefore, it's just an estimate of what's acceptable. Okay, so sampling procedures. We don't really need to worry about that as much, so I'm going to move on. So the instruments, this section should include the instruments that you plan on using to measure the variables in a research question. It needs to include the source of developers of the instrument. So in the example I gave in my previous video, we talked about that they use sample questions from the OAS bullying prevention program, and so that was all listed. And they have used their surveys many times before over national groups and over a long period of time, which makes them a good source. Validity and reliability of the information. So just that it's a reliable source and and they're using a valid instrument. I think in another one they talked about, an example I gave was using a particular assessment measure, and it has its own validity and reliability, which is why people are using it. And then the information on how it was normed reference, and then the other salient information like the number of items in each scale, the subsets, etc. So those are all things that help to develop this chapter. Now, most of the chapters are, or the sections of this particular capstone project, if you go back to the handbook, it's pages anywhere from 4 to 6 pages for each chapter. So we want to go ahead and make sure that we have that. Here's the research question, an example. The example was, what is the relationship between stress and achievement? And this is where they used the perceived stress scale, says who it was written by. And then it is a 10-item inventory used to assess the degree to which participants appraise their life as stressful within the past month. And more specifically, the respondents indicate how uncontrollable, unpredictable, or overloaded their lives are and their current level of experienced stress. And so the PSS is a widely used instrument for measuring the perception of stress and is commonly used in health-related researches. So if this was an instrument that you were using, then you would include all of this particular information on that instrument. Another one, same thing, same example of the research question, but they use the RAT, R-A-T, the RAT-3, which is a wide range achievement test. And they're going to compare those. So, and then they give us the same thing, a background of the particular RAT 3, and then how it's measured. So also this chapter will have procedures. The procedural section is based directly on the research question. Specifically, this is how to study of the section of the study, and it will introduce the design of the research and how the data will be collected based on the question of interest. The material should be presented in a step-by-step fashion, and then other researchers should be able to replicate this study by reading the procedure section without needing to ask any questions, all right? The research design is the actual structure or framework that indicates the time frame in which the data will be collected, when the intervention will be implemented or not, and how many groups will be involved. Again, this area for us is relatively small because of the time limits that we have, all right? So we would go in and use, make sure we fill in this aspect of it. All right, I think we did the step-by-step. Okay, so then the data analysis. These data analysis should be based on the research questions and the research design selected for the study and specific procedures for reducing and coding the data. For the qualitative studies, subsequent data analysis should be included in the summary descriptive statistics and inferential statistical tests. And for qualitative studies, the procedures should be followed for analysis and should also be addressed. We'll talk a little bit more about that in 605. All right, so that concludes what we'll be doing for chapter 3. I hope this information is a little bit more helpful for you. And then I have another one that I'll do for week 7 on the literature review. Thank you.